My life felt like a dream come true. One of those you're afraid to wake up from. I was about to marry Michael Reed, the man I had pictured for years as the father of my children. My life partner, my safest haven. Everything was prepared with care. The flowers, the menu, the music, even the small details only we understood. My mother, Linda, cried tears of joy as I looked at myself in the mirror, dressed in my white gown, while my father, Thomas, hovered in the doorway pretending not to wipe his eyes. I kept thinking that I had finally found true happiness. What I didn't know was that this wedding, which was supposed to seal a love story, would actually mark the beginning of my greatest tragedy. From the start, I knew I couldn't walk down the aisle without my best friend, Jessica Jenkins, by my side. She was more than just a friend. She was my soul sister, my confidant, the only person who knew every corner of my heart. That's why I chose her as my maid of honor without a second thought. No one questioned my decision. Everyone knew how deep our connection was. She smiled with a genuine-looking tenderness as she helped me with my veil and made sure everything was perfect, sliding an extra bobby pin into place, smoothing the satin so it wouldn't catch. What I didn't know was that behind her sweet eyes, a dark secret was hiding, a secret that would destroy my life from the inside out. We wanted an intimate wedding far from the hustle and bustle of the city. That's why we chose an elegant estate in the hills of Virginia, surrounded by century-old trees and blooming gardens. The place felt quietly magical, a stately stone manor, polished wood floors that creaked in friendly ways, cozy rooms, and a hall with high ceilings and enormous windows that let in the warm light of the setting sun. There, surrounded by our families and closest friends, we dreamed of celebrating our love and starting a new life together. Nothing seemed out of place. Everything felt harmonious. But that same place would soon witness the most painful collapse of my existence. We had rented the entire estate for the weekend so that our parents and the wedding party could stay the night before and after the wedding. We wanted it to be more than just an event. We wanted it to be a moment of togetherness, shared laughter, and joyful anticipation. The night before, we all had dinner together on the patio, string lights glowing softly, a jazz playlist murmuring from a Bluetooth speaker, and glasses of Virginia wine in our hands. Michael seemed calm, even affectionate, and Jessica never left my side. Just as always, his parents, Richard and Margaret, Maggie, Reed, looked pleased. Maggie said near the end that she felt a bit unwell and might pop into town for medicine. No one suspected that behind all that calm, a storm was brewing that would change our lives forever. That night, I went to bed with a heart full of hope, mentally replaying every moment of the day, convinced that I had finally found happiness. I fell asleep late, feeling nervous but happy, picturing the moment I would walk toward Michael in my white dress. The next morning, the first rays of sun came through the window, and I woke with an energy I hadn't felt since I was a little girl. Jessica was the first one to enter my room, bringing me breakfast on a tray, croissants, strawberries, and tea, with a smile that I now remember as a mask. I felt grateful, excited, and secure. I couldn't have known that nothing was real anymore. When it was time, my father took my arm and we walked toward the garden where everyone was waiting for us. The soft sound of string instruments, the white petals on the ground, the tearful eyes of our loved ones. Everything looked like it was from a storybook. Michael was waiting for me at the end of the aisle with glistening eyes and the smile that had made me fall in love with him so many times. I walked toward him, holding back tears, convinced I was taking the most important and beautiful step of my life. No one could have seen that my "I do" would actually be the beginning of my greatest heartbreak. When the officiant asked if we accepted to join our lives, I didn't hesitate for a second. My voice was shaky but firm as I said, "I do," my eyes full of love as I looked at Michael. He also said, "I do," with a smile, though for a moment I thought his expression dimmed right after he said it. I just figured it was nerves, that we all feel that little bit of anxiety when we take such a big step. We kissed to the sound of applause, surrounded by white flowers and tears of emotion. In that instant, I believed it was all worth it, that our love was real. The celebration was exactly as we had imagined, intimate, elegant, and full of joy. We ate under a starry sky with soft music playing in the background and candles lit at every table. There were moments of laughter, anecdotes, and hugs that seemed sincere, as if we were all part of something eternal. Michael talked to our guests and laughed, but there was something distant in the way he looked at me. I didn't want to think too much of it. I thought he was just tired from all the planning and decided to enjoy every second. My father stood up, emotional, to toast our union, speaking of how proud he was of me and how he had watched our love grow. Everyone applauded, and Michael raised his glass with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, as if he were forcing the emotion. I looked at him, trying to find that usual spark, but all I found was a strange silence in his gaze. I thought that maybe I was just being too sensitive, that I shouldn't look for problems where there weren't any. But deep down, something inside me was starting to crack, even though I didn't know it yet. After the party, we went up to the bridal suite together, a warm and elegant space we had decorated with flowers and candles to make it unforgettable. The windows looked out over the lavender beds, the air was sweet and clean. My heart was pounding, a mix of excitement and nerves as I thought about how special this night, our first as husband and wife, would be. I closed the door softly, wanting to prolong the intimate moment, believing we were about to seal our story with love. Michael placed his watch on the nightstand, took off his shoes without looking at me, and sighed heavily. I went to hug him, and that's when I heard it. "I'm tired," he said, not looking at me, his tone dry and flat, as if I wasn't even there. I stood frozen, trying to figure out if it was a joke, if something had happened that I didn't see. But his face was serious, distant, and completely devoid of emotion or desire. He turned his back to me, unbuttoned his shirt, and went straight to the twin bed that was in a corner of the room, an extra rollaway they'd brought earlier and forgotten to remove. He didn't say good night or turn around. He just turned off the lamp on that side, leaving the room in a silence that hurt more than any yell. I sat on the edge of the marriage bed, not knowing what to do with my body or my thoughts, feeling invisible on the most important night of my life. I waited what felt like endless minutes for a gesture, a word, an explanation, but all I got was the sound of his quiet breathing from the other side of the room. I slowly lay down on the bed, unable to hold back the tears, trying not to make a sound so I wouldn't seem pathetic. The room smelled of fresh flowers, but inside my chest, everything was withering, and that's how I spent my first night as a wife, alone. Confused, and with a broken soul. I don't know how long I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, wishing it was all a nightmare, that Michael would come over and hug me by surprise. But the hours passed, the silence was absolute, and his body remained still in the twin bed, as far from me as if we were two strangers. At some point, exhaustion won out, and I closed my eyes. But I couldn't have been asleep for more than 30 minutes when a muffled sound jolted me awake. I sat up, my heart racing, confused, trying to figure out where it was coming from. I turned my head, and Michael's bed was empty. I slowly got up, my bare feet on the cold floor, feeling a knot in my stomach that I couldn't explain. I walked to the door, opened it carefully, and heard the sound again. It was a short, stifled groan, as if someone was trying not to make noise. The hallway was dark, only lit by the faint light coming from a room at the end. I stood there for a few seconds, trying to convince myself that maybe it was a movie, a voice on the TV, anything logical, but something inside me already knew that I was about to hear what I should never have heard. I forced myself to move, still without making a sound, and that's when I remembered that the room belonged to Maggie Reed, Michael's mother. She had said at the end of dinner that she was feeling sick and had to go into town to get some medicine. She hadn't been back since, and no one seemed to have worried about her absence. My mind began to piece together the impossible, but my heart refused to believe it. What was Michael doing in there, in the middle of the night, in his mother's room, which was supposed to be empty? I took one more step. The groans continued, lower now, as if someone was holding their breath, as if they knew someone was listening. I swallowed hard and put my ear to the wood, holding my breath so I could hear more clearly. A soft creak of the bed, a muffled sigh, and then a woman's voice. I closed my eyes tightly, wishing I was wrong, but I recognized it instantly. It was Jessica. A sharp blow struck my chest. As if the ground had been pulled out from under me. I leaned against the cold wooden wall, shaking, unable to scream, unable even to breathe. It couldn't be her. It couldn't be Jessica, not Jess. And yet, the whispers were undeniable, those soft, breathless sounds I had heard 1,000 times when she laughed at my jokes. When she told me secrets late at night. But now they were laced with something else, something forbidden, intimate, stained. Then, I heard him. Michael's voice, low, breathless, murmuring her name in a way he had never said mine, not even on our wedding night. I felt something inside me splinter, not a clean break, but a shattering. My hands trembled so violently I had to press them against the wall just to stay upright. Silence might have been kinder. But the sounds continued, stifled gasps, hurried whispers, a shared urgency they tried to quiet. Every second stole air from my lungs. It was my wedding night, just hours after we had promised eternity. I didn't move, I couldn't, I stayed there, a statue carved out of disbelief and horror, while my heart sank into some dark depth I had never known existed. Memories flashed like cruel reels, Jess braiding my hair at 13. Michael tracing vows on my palm. Them both hugging me during the engagement dinner. Their faces, side by side, smiling. How long had they been standing next to me while already standing against me? A floorboard creaked from inside the room. The voices hushed. I stepped back. The door opened. Michael emerged first, shirt unbuttoned, belt undone, his hair disheveled in a way that was unmistakable. He froze when he saw me. Eyes widening, not with surprise, but with recognition. His lips parted as if to speak. But no sound came. His gaze darted away, toward the floor, as though he could erase what I had already heard. Then Jessica stepped out. Her hair was a tangled mess. Mascara bled in thin lines down her cheeks. She wasn't even wearing her heels, they were hanging from her fingers. For the first time in my life, she couldn't look at me. She went utterly still, no performance, no excuses, just a pathetic, frozen silence. None of us spoke. The hallway felt suddenly too narrow, as though it had been built only to trap us in this moment. I remained exactly where I was, blocking their path. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. Something deeper than rage, colder, clearer, settled over me. I found my voice, though it felt like it belonged to someone else. Why? My question landed like glass shattering on marble. Neither of them answered. Michael ran a hand through his hair, still avoiding my eyes, the same hand that had once held mine with such certainty. Jessica's shoulders began to tremble, but she didn't cry, not yet. When Michael finally spoke, his words were absurd. "Emily, this isn't what it looks like." My jaw tightened. I could taste blood where I had bitten my own tongue. Not what it looks like. I had heard them. I had felt the betrayal in my bones. And yet, he clung to the lie like a coward drowning. Jess wasn't feeling well. I was just helping her. She needed. I almost laughed. A hollow, bitter laugh that never reached the surface. Jessica remained silent, eyes glued to the floor as though if she didn't speak, if she didn't breathe, she could undo it all. I took one step closer. I heard everything. The words were low, steady, final. Michael's shoulders fell. The lie collapsed. His face shifted, not into regret, but into something worse, resignation. He didn't apologize. He didn't explain. He simply exhaled, as though relieved the performance was over. Jessica broke first. A small sob escaped her. A sound I'd never heard from her before, raw, animal, frightened. She covered her face with her hands. "Emily, I'm so sorry. I never meant to. I don't know how." Her voice crumbled. She didn't finish the sentence. Because there was no end that could justify the beginning. I could have screamed. I could have hit her. I could have fallen to my knees. But I did nothing. I was far beyond the reach of hysteria. I looked at both of them, the man I had married and the sister I had chosen, and saw strangers wearing familiar faces. Minutes passed, or maybe seconds. Time had stopped mattering. I turned around. I didn't slam the door. I didn't give them one more piece of me. I simply walked back down that hallway. Barefoot, wedding lace whispering against the floorboards. I left them there, tangled in shame and silence, where they belonged. Back in the bridal suite, I gathered nothing, not my ring, not my veil. I didn't need evidence of what had died. Only one thought remained, sharp and unshakable. I will not be quiet about this. I don't remember how I made it through the rest of that night. I must have sat there for hours, on the edge of the untouched marriage bed, staring at nothing. The walls still breathed with roses, candles half burned, ribbons still tied in bows, remnants of a celebration that, just hours earlier, had felt like forever. My body was numb, but inside me, something ancient, something fierce, had awakened, not rage, not sorrow, something colder, something that whispered, "This will not end in silence." Before dawn, without changing, without wiping the mascara tracks on my cheeks, I stood. I was still in my wedding dress. The train dragged behind me, stained from pacing. My hair was falling loose from the pins Jessica herself had placed just hours before. I looked at myself in the mirror one last time, and I no longer recognized the woman in it. That woman, the bride, was gone. I walked out of the room, barefoot. The corridor was empty. Their door was shut. Cowards. They wouldn't face me, not yet. I made my way down the grand staircase. The house was stirring to life, muffled footsteps, clinking dishes, soft morning voices. They were preparing breakfast. Unaware, I could already hear my mother's laugh. Someone asked where the bride and groom were. No one had noticed I disappeared. I entered through the side doorway to the dining hall. The long wooden table was set with fruit, coffee, pastries. Conversations flowed gently, untouched by truth. My parents were seated together. My father pouring my mother tea. Michael's parents, Richard and Maggie, spoke quietly on the other end. I stood at the threshold for several seconds. Not one person looked up. The absurdity of it all nearly made me laugh, a sound that would have terrified them. I took a breath. I wiped the final tear from my face with the back of my hand. Then, I stepped forward. A guest noticed me first. Their voice faltered. One by one, heads turned. Confusion spread across every face. My mother stood immediately, eyes searching my face. My father's brows knit with alarm. But I raised a hand. "Please," I said, and my voice was calm, firmer than I'd ever heard it. "Can everyone move to the main living room? I have something to say." Silence. No one dared question. Something in my tone, or perhaps in my disheveled bridal gown, warned them this was no minor request. They rose. Chairs scraped the floor. Slowly, everyone followed me to the living room, the one with the stone fireplace and the portrait of the estate's original owners above it. I stood near the mantel. They settled into sofas and armchairs, anxious, whispering now. But two faces were missing. Michael, Jessica. Of course. They hid. My parents looked at each other. My mother clutched her chest. My father stood, as if ready to pull me away if I began to unravel. But I didn't. I looked around the room, into the faces of our siblings. Cousins, aunts, childhood friends, his family, my family. I cleared my throat. "Thank you all for being here," I began. "Yesterday was meant to be the happiest day of my life. Last night was meant to be my beginning." My voice did not shake. But it was not. A hush fell so complete I could hear the clock ticking on the far wall. "I won't keep you long. I only need to say this once, and I will not say it again." I drew a breath. Last night, on my wedding night, I found Michael and Jessica together. A gasp. Someone dropped a cup. My mother staggered forward, caught by my father. Richard Reed, Michael's father, shut his eyes. Maggie covered her mouth, turning pale. I continued. Not talking, not comforting, not by accident. I looked around the room, letting no one escape it. They were in bed, in his mother's room, while I was still in my wedding dress. Murmurs burst like fireworks. A cousin stood in disbelief. Someone whispered number. Another said impossible. No one, not even his own parents, attempted to defend them. Because they knew. They knew I would not lie. I gave them no dramatic pause. No tears. Just truth, carved sharp. I will have this marriage annulled. I will not see either of them again. I don't want pity, or opinions, or attempts to persuade me otherwise. My decision is final, and I hope you all respect it." That was all. My father stood. He crossed the room and wrapped me in a silent embrace so tight I could feel his heartbeat trying to steady mine. When he let go, my mother reached for me, sobbing quietly, not in shame, but helpless rage. Still, no one spoke. No one said stay. No one said, "Are you sure?" They knew I already had one foot outside this life. I stepped back, looked at every face one last time. And then I left. I walked out of that estate without once looking behind me. My wedding gown trailed through the damp morning grass. The air was cold, the sky was gray, but I had never felt more awake. I did not answer calls. I did not respond to messages. That version of my life, of myself, had died in that hallway. And I refused to bury her quietly. In the days that followed, I moved through life like a ghost inhabiting my own body. I didn't return to Michael's house. I didn't go back to Jessica's apartment. I went home, to the one place still carrying traces of who I had been before all of this. I slept in my childhood room for 3 nights without sleeping at all. My mother left trays of food outside my door. My father sat in the hallway some evenings, quietly guarding my silence. They didn't ask questions. They knew that words would shatter what little strength I had left. The morning after I left the estate, I contacted a lawyer. I did not wait for apologies. I did not wait for explanations. I did not even wait for shame. I asked for an annulment, not a divorce. A divorce ends something real. What I had agreed to with Michael was built on lies. It was never a marriage. I did not see him in person again. I would not grant him that mercy. Weeks passed. I learned, through family whispers, that Michael and Jessica had moved in together. I suppose betrayal feels less shameful when 2 traitors share it. They were seen in town, quiet, strained, avoiding eye contact with anyone who recognized them. They tried to present something resembling a relationship, as if their union had been born from forbidden love rather than mutual cowardice. But life, I would learn, has a precise way of revealing truth. By the end of the 3rd month, cracks had already begun to show. Neighbors reported arguments, shouting, doors slamming. Jessica's once perfectly curated appearance gave way to exhaustion, eyes swollen, hair unkempt, voice hoarse. She had gained what she stole, yet lost what she never expected, everybody else. Friends vanished. Invitations stopped. People don't forget a betrayal like that. They don't forgive it, either, especially when it was done to someone who never saw it coming. As for Michael, he grew distant even from her. He stopped coming home some nights. Eventually, just like he had on my wedding night, he slipped away in silence. One morning, Jessica woke up alone. He was gone. No confrontation, no closure, just a note, and a lie. She had given up a sister for a man who could never love anyone, not fully. Not faithfully, not even himself. I heard this not with triumph, but with a numb sense of inevitability. It proved what I already knew on that hallway floor. He had never chosen her. He had chosen momentary gratification. And she had chosen to believe that made her special. But I no longer followed their story, because I had begun rebuilding mine. I threw myself into work. Into early mornings and coffee-stained paperwork. Into designing, planning, creating, anything that tethered me to forward motion. I expanded my store. I opened another, then a third. My name began to circulate with a kind of quiet reverence, not as the woman whose wedding had collapsed, but as a woman who built something from her own ashes. People admired me. They did not know me. Because true rebuilding is not made of ambition. It's made of solitude. It's made of walking through an empty house at midnight and realizing you did not shatter. It's made of silence, not the dead silence Michael left me in, but the living silence I gave myself. I learned to sit alone in cafes without glancing at couples. I learned to sleep without checking the other side of the bed. I learned to exist without apology. 3 years passed. 3 years without love. But also 3 years without heartbreak. My life had become steady, quiet, simple. Some people said I had grown colder. The truth was, I had grown calmer. I was no longer waiting for someone to choose me. I had chosen myself. I met him, Daniel Jackson, on a day that was not special. No sunbeam broke through clouds. No music swelled. It was a business meeting. A presentation. Numbers. Graphs. Plans. He was not extravagant. He did not try to impress me. He simply looked at me when I spoke, really looked, and listened as though every word had weight. I did not feel butterflies. I felt peace. And after everything, peace scared me more than passion ever had. He didn't flirt. He didn't chase. He showed up, patient, consistent, kind. If I took 2 steps back, he stayed where he was. If I turned away, he did not grab my arm, he waited for me to turn back on my own. I found myself anticipating his voice in the evenings. The way he said, "Take care," like a promise rather than a habit. He never asked about Michael or Jessica. He didn't treat me like something broken to be fixed. He treated me like someone whole, someone he simply wanted to know. At first, I mistrusted it. I waited for him to reveal a hidden cruelty, a selfishness, a lie, because I had once believed in safety, and that belief had nearly destroyed me. But Daniel was different. He never asked me to trust him. He simply gave me reasons to. I don't know how, but eventually Michael found out about Daniel. Perhaps someone mentioned seeing us together. Perhaps he could sense, somehow, that I had found a peace he could never give, the kind that doesn't beg, doesn't chase, doesn't break. He sent me a message first. It was brief, polite, cloaked in nostalgia. "I'm glad you're doing well. I still think about what we lost. I wish you happiness." But between those lines, I could read the truth. It bothered him that I had survived him. I didn't respond. One afternoon, without warning, he showed up at my store. He looked thinner, older, not in years, but in spirit. His eyes, once full of certainty, were now clouded. He stood at the door like a stranger uncertain of his place. "Can I have 5 minutes?" he asked. I could have refused. But I didn't. Not because I owed him closure, but because I didn't need to fear his voice anymore. We stepped into my office. He looked around, at the framed newspaper articles, at the shelves stacked with products bearing my logo, at the world I had built without him. He sat. I remained standing. For a while, he said nothing. Then, slowly, "I made a mistake. I was a coward. I didn't know how to love you the way you deserved." I listened, not with anger, not with longing, but with the same detachment with which one listens to rain against a closed window. He searched my face for something, pain, forgiveness, maybe even longing. He found nothing. When he finished, I spoke with the same calm I had found 3 years earlier in the living room of that estate. "You no longer have any power over me. There is no we. There is no going back. You made the choice you thought you wanted, and I lived the life you thought I couldn't. That's all there is." I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I didn't give him the satisfaction of witnessing my wounds. His jaw tensed. In his eyes, frustration flickered, as if it angered him to see I was not only healed, but free. He muttered, almost spitefully, "You moved on fast." I didn't react, because what would have once broken me, now meant nothing. He left. And I closed the door behind him. Not to keep him out, but because he had not belonged here for a very long time. Daniel came in a few minutes later, unaware of what had happened. The moment he saw my face, he didn't ask a single question. He didn't demand explanations. He simply walked over and wrapped his arms around me. No rescue, just presence. That was the moment I knew, true love does not enter like fire. It settles like light. People often ask me if I ever trusted again after what I went through. I tell them, not only did I trust again, I learned to choose better. Daniel did not come to save me. He met me already whole, and chose me as I was. I know my story is not unique. There are many who have been betrayed, humiliated, or abandoned just when they believed they had everything. But if I could leave them with anything, it would be this. Do not let yourself be broken by someone who doesn't know how to love. Do not stay where there is no respect. The strongest love you will ever know is the one you build with yourself. Everything else, when it comes, is only ever meant to be a compliment, never the center. Today, I write this from the terrace of my home, a cup of tea in my hand. while Daniel reads beside me. The sun is setting. There is no applause, no grand declarations, no proof to anyone. Just peace. Because peace does not sound like fireworks. It sounds like shared silence, mutual respect, and knowing that nothing is missing. Sometimes, when I walk past a storefront and catch my reflection, I no longer search my eyes for anyone's approval. I only look to recognize myself. And I do. Not as a bride. Not as a victim. Not even as a survivor. But as a woman reborn. I keep a box from that day, dried flowers, photographs, a piece of lace. Not to torture myself, but to honor the woman who lived through the fire so I could become the woman drinking tea at dusk. If you have ever believed that true love wasn't meant for you, let me leave you with one final truth. Love does not come when someone chooses you. It comes when you finally choose yourself. Did you like my story? Let's meet in the comments. If you liked the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you will see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story, with love and respect.